Bail me out, Uncle Sam. The issue is student debt. And the question is, what are the consequences of student debt relief for young Americans?
Political revolution of the millennium.
Welcome to Political Playlist.
All right. Are we ready, guys?
Happy Hour.
Happy hour.
We fucked that up so bad.
God.
Welcome to Political Playlist Happy Hour. I'm Michael Kristoff.
I'm Anna Muskie-Goldwyn.
Anthony Barquette.
Anthony's a little rough around the edges today.
Somebody sounds a little raspy. Would you eat an ashtray over the weekend? Where the hell have you been?
Coachella.
Wow.
Yeah,
well, we
right.
know who the partier is in this group.
Definitely.
What are we drinking here, gang? Looks like I see a Pedialyte in Anthony's square.
I have a margarita that is way too strong. So we'll see how I end up in 20
I
minutes.
have vitamin water with vodka.
Oh, love that. Well,
Oh my God. That just made me throw up.
I have an interesting little cocktail there. I have an Amaro on the rocks with a
So
little
fancy.
orange zest. Amaro is an aperitif.
I know. I've been seeing some people drink Amaro recently.
It's
Is this
kind
like
of
the
the new
new
thing.
trend?
Yeah.
God.
Yeah. We are talking about an interesting one here, and that is student debt. Anna, you asked a really interesting question. What are we looking at here?
So the question is, what are the consequences of student debt relief for young Americans?
So just to give some context to this, we should say that the Biden administration recently extended the moratorium that it had on student debt and interest forgiveness now until August 31st. And what this means is that you don't have to pay your student debt at the moment, nor the interest that you would be accruing on it. Currently, it is totaled to be 45 million borrowers of student debt, currently hold student debt to the tune of $1.6 trillion.
Ching.
Yikes.
Also, there was a statistic that the Department of Education has come out with saying that so far it has cost the federal government $100 billion since this freeze started in 2020, which was under Trump due to COVID and then just kept getting extended.
Right. So we're now almost at the 2-year mark, a little beyond.
So you're saying the government hasn't been able to collect $100 billion?
Yeah, because
Interest
they've
payments were
gone. Yeah, exactly.
This is crazy. So obviously what we're seeing now among our young lawmakers is really two definitive camps. At first, during all this, there was a little bit of bipartisan consensus that we should do this. But now, beyond the 2-year mark, we've sort of gone to our different camps. What does that sort of overarching point of view look like for Republicans and Democrats?
Oh my God, my drink is so strong, guys. Well, I would actually argue there's kind of 3 camps a little bit.
Okay.
There's the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party that is essentially saying cancel all student debt. And then there is the moderate wing of the Democratic Party who is kind of being a little hush hush on this because they seem to be primarily concerned about the increase in the national deficit, which when you look at the numbers is a pretty valid concern. But since loan forgiveness or freeze is very popular amongst especially young Democrats, they're not going to come out against this move by the Biden administration. And then you have the Republicans who by and large think that the payments need to restart for a variety of reasons.
The government has paused interest payments on student debt and now is responsible for that, covering that to the tune of $5 billion per month. So
just imagine you could do a $5 billion a month.
Yeah, there's a few things you could do with that.
It's so funny that we're talking about this issue this week because this weekend I was actually talking to someone about student debt. And I was saying, I really don't understand how people can afford to go to college anymore, especially with not even the whole inflation issue going on, but just in terms of your starting salary when you get out of college. Unless you are in a finance job,
right,
you are not making anywhere close to money to pay back your student debt. Right. And still, if you're in that echelon of the finance world, it's still going to take you at least 5 years to pay off your debt.
Yeah. Well, also the student loan debt is second greatest debt in America behind mortgage payments, but it's
Wow.
above all credit card debt.
Wow.
Yeah.
And the other screwed up thing that I was talking to someone about this weekend was
By the way, can we just come out and say you were having all these conversations while you were at Coachella? I was talking to someone this weekend about student debt and the high price of higher education as we were raving in the front of like a DJ.
I don't rave, so that started
As you were like butt bumping to Lizzo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Boy.
Am I done here? Because I've been being made fun of all week. Okay.
Wow. Hey,
No.
the shoe fits.
Yeah, true.
So let's talk about the Democratic argument as to why they think student loan debt and interest payments should be forgiven. Obviously, it's to varying degrees and varying extents.
One of the biggest arguments behind this is essentially to close inequality gaps, specifically racial inequality gaps. I didn't know this, but I was reading that Black graduates default at 5 times a higher rate than white graduates, both of whom hold bachelor degrees.
Wow.
So I think that we do see the ways that socioeconomic and also racial systemic issues in our country play into an issue like student debt. And I think that it comes to light really in someone like Ro Khanna, who's a very progressive Democrat from Northern California, from Silicon Valley, but also tends to frame things in a very sort of financial way. And he said that what other country makes people going into debt $30,000 to $40,000 to get education or to get certain skills? I don't know a single other country where you have to do that.
So is Ro Khanna proposing something?
He's saying that $10,000 in loan forgiveness should be the floor that we should be getting to. So that at least $10,000 should be forgiven for any student debt holder. And that from there, it would depend on income levels and other factors as to how much money you would get forgiven in your student debt.
Gotcha. So, Anthony, I feel like you're really good at bursting bubbles. What are the Republicans saying about this?
Well, no surprise here in our political system. They're not a big fan of this. They're pretty much against the freeze or cancellations that benefit high income earners.
Right. And there is actually some statistical proof that in a plan like Elizabeth Warren's, which is one of the big progressive plans, that a lot of these higher income borrowers would be getting quite a bit of loan forgiveness. So for them, the big thing is kind of what we hear from a lot of conservatives, which is this idea that Tom Cotton said of there's no free lunch.
I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but I do agree with Tom Cotton here. I don't think it should be totally canceled. It is a responsibility. People need to have accountability. It is easier for me to say that since I do not have any student debt. And I said this in one of our previous sessions where I don't think a lot of people understand what a loan is when they're at the young age to going into college. And that's a big issue to me.
That's part of the problem, right? Is I think, so I just want to bring one other politician into this discussion because it relates exactly to this, who's Byron Donalds, a Black Republican from Florida. He actually just paid off his student loans with a big lump sum. And what he says is he feels like it's kind of to your point, Anthony, is that he feels that it's unfair that people who have managed to figure out how to pay off these high dollar loans paid it off, but now other people won't. But more specifically, I'll read a quote from him because I think it's exactly what you're saying, Anthony. He said, I don't want to be glib, but young people have to take stock of what they're majoring in. You know, why would I go to a private university to major in art history? Odds are you're not getting a job, definitely in your degree field, in order to pay back the money that you're taking on. And I think that as it pertains to my initial question, which is what are the consequences for young Americans? Really, the consequences are one of two choices. One is particularly young Americans get saddled with continuing student loan payments, which are going to be harder and harder to pay off, or a generation of Americans get saddled with a national deficit, which now is over $30 trillion.
Well, I'd also add that I think this opens up that sort of age-old question of like problem versus solution, and where is that problem and what problem are we solving, right? So the idea that this enormous amount of debt that 45 million Americans now statistically carry, you know, that is a whole generation of people who are not going to be racing out to buy homes. They are not they don't have the financial bandwidth to begin to build wealth for themselves and their families. So this idea that this is kind of a crisis in many ways that's affecting, our generation. And that isn't to say that the solution is to just absolve debt or to not absolve debt. But really I think the broader problem maybe stems before the debt is taken on.
I think it's going to fall into the same thing that we said with immigration, that it's just going to pendulum back and forth depending on which party and which president is in power. I don't know. It's complicated. Yeah. I feel like these issues like immigration, education, they're not sexy and it's really hard to get people to agree, but it's going to be in the news a lot, I think. And I think it's going to be a big issue for Biden because he's losing the enthusiasm of young Americans and continuing these freezes and stuff like that are going to potentially invigorate a large voting bloc that he needs to be excited to vote in 2022 and also in 2024.